I never thought I'd be back in school after graduating years ago, but there I was sitting in a familiar classroom, with that smell of chalk and coffee mixing in the air. The evening course was supposed to be just a formality. I had signed up for an advanced literature class mostly because my job was pushing me to complete some personal development training. But then she walked in, and suddenly I couldn't remember why I was here at all. Miss Bennet. She wasn't just another teacher, she looked like she had stepped out of a movie. Her dark hair was tied into a neat bun, her glasses gave her that strict professional look, and her fitted white blouse hinted that she wasn't shy about looking good even while teaching. There was something about the way she carried herself, calm, confident, completely in control of the room, that made everyone sit up straighter. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice smooth but commanding. "I'm Miss Bennet. Welcome to Advanced Literature. I hope you're ready to work. This won't be an easy ride." Her eyes swept across the classroom, scanning faces. When her gaze landed on me, she paused for half a second longer than with anyone else. Or maybe I imagined it. The first half of the class was all about introductions, course outlines, expectations. But honestly, I barely heard a word. I kept stealing glances at her, the way her pen moved across the board, the way her blouse pulled just slightly when she reached up to pin a paper, the way she leaned against the desk with casual authority. She was older than me, maybe 10 years or so, but that just made her presence even more intense. She had that aura of a woman who knew exactly who she was and who wasn't about to let some guy like me shake her focus. And maybe that was why I couldn't stop thinking about shaking it. After class, I hung back while most people filed out. She was still at the desk, gathering papers, when I finally walked up. "Excuse me," I said, hoping my voice didn't crack. She glanced up, adjusting her glasses, then smiled politely. "Yes. I just wanted to say I'm really looking forward to this class. I haven't done anything like this since college." "Good," she said, nodding. "Then let's see if you can keep up. This course moves fast." There was no flirt in her tone, just a professional challenge. But the way she said it lit a spark in me. "I like a challenge," I replied before I could stop myself. She held my gaze a second longer, then looked back at her papers. "You'll get one," she said simply. Walking home that night, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation. It wasn't much, just a few words. But it felt like the start of something. The next class was a few days later. This time, I made sure to sit closer to the front. We were analyzing a short story, and Miss Bennet had us work in pairs to break down the themes. By some stroke of luck or fate, we ended up with an odd number of students. "Looks like you'll work with me," she said, gesturing for me to pull my chair closer to her desk. I tried to act calm as I sat next to her, but my heart was thudding in my chest. We leaned over the same page, our shoulders almost touching. "Tell me what you see here," she asked, pointing to a passage. I started explaining my thoughts, probably overthinking every word I said. She listened, her head slightly tilted, her pen tapping against her notebook. "You're more perceptive than most," she said finally. "That's a good thing, right?" "It can be," she said, her lips curling into the smallest of smirks. The class ended, but I stayed again, not even pretending to have a reason this time. She noticed. "You're not in a hurry to leave, are you?" she asked, stacking her books. "Not really. I like it here." And, I hesitated, then went for it. "I like talking to you." For the first time, she looked genuinely surprised. But then, To my relief, she smiled. "Careful," she said softly. "You might get more than you bargained for." That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. Her voice, her smirk, the way her perfume lingered on my sleeve, it was all too vivid. And for the first time, I realized this class might not just change my resume. It might change everything. After that night, everything felt different. When I walked into class, I caught her glancing at me just a moment longer than she used to. When she called on me to answer, there was a subtle curve to her lips, a secret smile that only I seemed to notice. The space between us buzzed with something invisible but undeniable. I started sitting closer to the front. I stayed behind more often. Sometimes we didn't even talk about schoolwork. Sometimes we just talked. About books, about music, about life beyond the classroom walls. One afternoon, as the winter sun filtered pale light through the windows, she leaned against the edge of her desk while I packed my bag. "You seem distracted lately," she said, tilting her head. I smirked. "Maybe I just have a lot on my mind." Her eyebrow lifted. "Like what?" I hesitated, then shrugged. "Like, how strange it feels to grow up. How everything suddenly looks different. People. Relationships. The future." Her gaze softened, and for a moment she didn't look like my teacher, she just looked like a woman who understood. "It's normal," she said quietly. "Change always feels unsettling. But sometimes it's the only way we figure out who we really are." Her words lingered in my head long after I left. The next time she asked me to stay after class, the air felt charged before I even walked in. The room was quiet except for the sound of my footsteps. She closed the door behind me. "Help me with these," she said, pointing at a pile of books. I carried them to the shelves, feeling her presence behind me. When I turned, she was closer than I expected. Too close. Our eyes locked. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she stepped back, almost reluctantly, and busied herself with a stack of papers. "You've been writing more," she said casually. "I can tell. Your essays have, itch." I smiled faintly. "Maybe you inspire me." That made her pause. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and something I couldn't name. "That's dangerous," she murmured. "Why?" I asked. Her lips curved just slightly. "Because inspiration can take you places you're not ready to go." The way she said it felt like a challenge. The weeks that followed blurred into something that felt half like reality, half like a dream. Every glance, every word carried more weight. One day, she adjusted my tie for a school event, her fingers brushing my collarbone, and I swear I stopped breathing. Another time, I caught her watching me as I worked on an essay in the library. She didn't look away immediately. I began to wonder if I was imagining it all. But then came the moment that erased all doubt. It was late again, just the two of us in her office. I had been helping her sort through exam papers when I accidentally dropped a few on the floor. We both reached for them at the same time, and suddenly we were closer than we had ever been. Her hand froze, inches from mine. I looked up. Her eyes were dark, unreadable. "Careful," she whispered. I said, my voice lower than I intended. She didn't move away right away. Instead, she studied me for a long moment, as if weighing a decision. Then she straightened and walked to her desk. "You should go," she said softly, almost regretfully. I left, but the moment stayed burned into me. The next day, I couldn't concentrate. I kept replaying it in my mind, the closeness, the look in her eyes. After school, I sent her a message through the school portal, something casual about an assignment. She replied quickly, but her answer felt warmer than necessary. And then, a week later, she surprised me. "You know," she said after class, "you've been helping me so much lately, I should at least thank you. How about coffee? Off school grounds." I froze. Coffee? With her? I tried to sound casual. "Sure." She smiled, that same secret smile that had been haunting me for weeks. "Saturday," she said. "There's a cafe near the park noon." That Saturday, I got there early. I must have checked my reflection a dozen times before she arrived. When she walked in, she wasn't wearing her usual work clothes. No glasses, no blazer, just a simple sweater and jeans. She looked different. Softer. "You're early," she said, smiling. "Couldn't help it," I admitted. We ordered coffee and sat by the window. For the first few minutes, it felt almost normal, like two people just talking. But as the conversation flowed, it grew more personal. She asked about my life outside school, my plans, my fears. At one point, she reached across the table and brushed something off my sleeve. "You're still a little bit of a mess," she teased. I grinned. "Guess I need someone to keep me in line." Her eyes glinted at that, and she leaned back, studying me. "Careful what you wish for," she said, and for a moment, there was nothing playful in her tone. The rest of the afternoon felt like a dance, each word, each glance bringing us closer to something neither of us wanted to name out loud. When we parted ways, she touched my arm briefly. "See you Monday," she said. But we both knew this wasn't just about Monday anymore. This was no longer just curiosity. It was becoming something we couldn't easily step back from. And somewhere deep inside, I knew I didn't want to. By Monday, it was impossible to see her the same way. When Ms. Carter walked into class, I caught myself staring at her in a way I probably shouldn't have. She must have noticed, because at one point she stopped mid-lecture, glanced my way, and the corner of her mouth curved just slightly before she continued. I spent the entire lesson in a haze, hearing her words but not quite processing them. When the bell rang, I stayed behind again. "You seem distracted," she said, packing her notes. "Maybe I am." Her eyes held mine for a long moment. "About Saturday?" I nodded slowly. She let out a quiet laugh, a sound I'd rarely heard from her. "You overthink too much." "Maybe I just can't stop thinking," I replied. Something in her expression shifted, like she hadn't expected me to say that. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stood, walked over to me, and placed a hand lightly on the back of my chair. "You're too bold for your own good," she murmured. "Or maybe you like it," I said before I could stop myself. Her hand lingered just a second longer before she pulled back. "Go home," she said softly, but there was no anger in her tone. The following Friday, she asked me to help her prepare for a small evening event at the school, a teachers' meeting and book discussion that was apparently open to the public. I stayed late, moving chairs, arranging tables, and helping set up coffee cups. She seemed more relaxed than usual, smiling as she watched me work. "You clean up nicely," she said as I set the last table. "So do you," I replied without hesitation. She didn't hide her smile this time. As the evening went on, a few teachers arrived, along with several guests. One of them was a woman I hadn't seen before, younger than Ms. Carter, maybe in her late 20s, with dark hair and an easy confidence in the way she moved. "Ah, this is Emily," Ms. Carter said, introducing her to me. "She teaches art." Emily offered her hand with a warm smile. "So you're the student she talks about," she said. I blinked. "She talks about me." Emily laughed softly. "Relax, it's all good things." I glanced at Ms. Carter, who was watching me with a faintly amused look. "She exaggerates," Ms. Carter said, but there was a note in her voice I couldn't quite read. As the meeting went on, I noticed the way Emily and Ms. Carter interacted, easy, familiar, like old friends. Occasionally, Emily would glance at me, a curious glint in her eyes, as though she were trying to figure me out. During a break, Emily sat down next to me. "So," she said, sipping her coffee, "you must be the reason she's been staying late more than usual." I felt heat creep up my neck. "I just help sometimes." Emily tilted her head, clearly unconvinced. "Sure. Just helping." There was a playful tone in her voice that made me shift uncomfortably, not because I minded, but because it felt like she knew too much. Ms. Carter walked over just then, arching an eyebrow. "Are you interrogating him?" "Just getting to know your star pupil," Emily said with a grin. Something passed between them in that moment, a look, brief but meaningful. After the event ended, I helped clean up. Emily stayed behind as well, chatting with Ms. Carter while I stacked chairs. At one point, I heard them laugh softly about something, and when I looked up, they were both watching me. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," Emily said, smiling. "Just noticing how helpful you are." I caught Ms. Carter's eye. There was something almost mischievous in her expression. When everything was finally done, Emily said goodbye and left, but not before giving me a look that lingered a second too long. "She's interesting," I said when it was just the two of us. Ms. Carter nodded. "She's been my friend for years." "She seems to know a lot about you," I said carefully. "That's what friends are for," she replied, her tone calm but unreadable. I hesitated before asking, "Do you tell her about me?" Her lips curved. "Would it bother you if I did?" I swallowed. "I don't know." She took a step closer, her voice low. "Maybe I like that she knows." My breath caught. For a long moment, we just stood there, the air between us thick with something neither of us dared to name. Then she smiled faintly and turned off the lights. "Go home," she said again, but her voice was softer this time, almost inviting. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not just because of Ms. Carter, but because of Emily too. The way she looked at me, the way she seemed to understand something about what was happening, made my pulse quicken. It felt like a door had been opened and part of me was curious to see where it would lead. This wasn't just about me and Ms. Carter anymore. Something told me Emily might become part of this story too. The next week felt like living in slow motion. Every class with Ms. Carter was charged with a kind of tension that only we could feel. I noticed the way her hand lingered when she passed me a paper, the way her eyes softened when she called my name. But something else had changed Emily. A few days later, I saw her again in the hallway. She smiled when she spotted me, almost as if she'd been expecting me. "Hey," she said, falling into step beside me. "Busy helping your favorite teacher again?" I smirked. "Maybe." Emily's grin widened. "You know, she doesn't let just anyone hang around after hours. You must be special. Or just helpful." "Sure," she said, clearly not buying it. Anyway, she and I are meeting later this week to plan something for the spring event. You should come by. Could use the extra hands. I hesitated. Are you sure she'd want me there? Emily gave me a look that was both amused and knowing. Trust me, she won't mind. That Friday, I found myself walking into Ms. Carter's office after school to see both of them sitting at her desk, laughing about something I hadn't heard. Oh, look who's here, Emily said with a teasing smile. Ms. Carter glanced up at me, her expression unreadable for a second, then it softened. Good timing. We were just about to start. The three of us spent the next hour arranging papers, planning schedules, and discussing ideas for the event. But it wasn't just work. There were moments of laughter, moments when Emily would nudge me playfully, moments when Ms. Carter would glance at me with that look that made my chest tighten. At one point, Emily left the room to grab something from the lounge, leaving just the two of us. You seem comfortable around her, Ms. Carter said, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. She's easy to talk to, I said honestly. Too easy. I raised an eyebrow. Are you jealous? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her. Maybe I am, she said finally, her voice low. My breath caught. Her hand brushed against mine on the desk, not by accident this time. It lingered there, her fingers barely grazing my skin. You shouldn't play with fire, I whispered. She tilted her head, a faint, almost dangerous smile on her lips. Maybe I like fire. Before I could say anything, the sound of footsteps in the hallway made her pull back. Emily walked in a second later, holding a stack of flyers. Am I interrupting? She asked lightly, looking between us. No, Ms. Carter said quickly, her voice calm again. Just talking. Emily gave me a curious look but didn't comment. When we finally wrapped up, Emily stretched and said, you know what? We should celebrate finishing this. How about grabbing a drink? There's a little place near campus. Ms. Carter hesitated for a moment, then looked at me. Why not? She said. The place was small and warm, with soft lighting and music that made conversation easy. The three of us sat in a corner booth, talking about everything from books to art to the upcoming break. Emily was the one who started teasing. So, she said, leaning her chin on her hand, are you always this quiet, or just when you're sitting with two teachers? I chuckled. Just trying not to get in trouble. Relax, she said with a grin. We're not grading you right now. Ms. Carter smirked at that, sipping her drink. Though I could, if you want me to. The way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. Emily caught it. Her smile turned almost wicked. Oh, I think he'd like that. Ms. Carter shot her a warning look, but Emily just laughed. By the time we left, the air between us felt charged. Emily said goodbye outside, giving me one last amused glance before walking away. When it was just Ms. Carter and me, she stood still for a moment, the cold night air swirling around us. Your trouble, she said softly. Maybe you like trouble, I said, echoing her words from before. She looked at me for a long moment, then stepped closer, so close I could see the faint trace of lipstick on her lower lip. Her hand came up, brushing my collar lightly. You drive me crazy, she whispered. I swallowed hard. Good crazy. Her smile was slow, dangerous. You'll find out. Then she turned and started walking toward her car, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding. That night, I couldn't think of anything else. Not Ms. Carter's touch, not her words, not the way Emily seemed to be enjoying this game as much as we were. Something was coming, I could feel it. And for the first time, I wasn't just ready for it. I wanted it. The following week, I could barely focus on anything. It wasn't just that I was thinking about Ms. Carter every second, it was that I knew she was thinking about me too. The looks we exchanged in class were no longer subtle. They were almost electric. By Thursday, she finally broke the silence. "Stay after class," she said casually as the bell rang, but her tone carried weight. I waited while the last students left. The door clicked shut. She stood by her desk, arms crossed, watching me. "You've been distracting me," she said softly. "Pretty sure you've been distracting me too," I replied. Her lips curved in a slow smile. "You really have no fear, do you?" I took a step closer. "Maybe I just know what I want." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she crossed the space between us in 2 quick steps. Before I could say another word, her hand was on my collar, pulling me closer, and her lips were on mine. It wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was weeks of tension breaking all at once. I felt the desk press against my back as she deepened the kiss, one hand braced against the wood, the other resting on my shoulder. My hands hovered for a moment before I placed them gently on her waist. When she finally pulled back, her breathing was unsteady. "This is insane," she whispered. "Maybe," I said, "but it feels right." She closed her eyes briefly, as if steadying herself, then let out a quiet laugh. "You're going to get me into trouble," she murmured. "Or maybe I'll get us both into trouble," I said. Her smile turned wicked. "You might enjoy that." We didn't cross every line that night, but we came close. She sat me down at her desk, leaning close, speaking in a low voice that made my heart pound. "You have no idea how hard it's been not to do that sooner," she admitted. "Then don't stop," I said. Her hand slid briefly down my arm before she pulled back, forcing herself to create space. "Not here," she said finally, her tone soft but firm. I nodded, breathless. "Then tell me where." She hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Tomorrow. After school. My place." I barely slept that night. The next day felt endless, every minute dragging until the final bell finally rang. When I arrived at her house, my pulse was racing. She opened the door, dressed casually, but the look in her eyes was anything but casual. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. Her home felt warm, quiet, private. The moment the door clicked shut, the atmosphere changed completely. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then she reached for me again. This kiss was slower, deeper. Her hands framed my face, her body close to mine. My hands found her back, pulling her gently closer. We moved to the couch, where we stayed for what felt like hours, kissing, talking in hushed voices, laughing quietly in between. She didn't rush anything. Every touch felt deliberate, every glance heavy with meaning. At one point, she pulled back, brushing my hair out of my face. "You know this can't just be casual," she said. "I don't want it to be casual," I replied. Her expression softened. For a moment, she just looked at me, like she was memorizing my face. "Your trouble," she said again, but this time there was no hesitation in her tone. "And you like trouble," I said, smiling. Her laugh was quiet, genuine, and she kissed me again. When I finally left that night, the air was cold, but I felt warm all over. As I stepped out the door, I saw someone leaning casually against a car across the street. Emily. She gave me a little wave and a knowing smile before getting into her car and driving off. I stood there for a long moment, heart still pounding, wondering just how much she knew and if maybe, just maybe, she'd be part of whatever came next. For the first time, I wasn't just imagining a future with Ms. Carter. I could see it dangerous, complicated, but irresistibly real. And maybe, just maybe, we wouldn't be the only two in it.